Welcome to the Stellar Vault. Say hi in the comments to awaken the archive. Then like, subscribe, and let the tale begin.
Year 2451. Council Citadel, Sector Prime. By unanimous vote, Sol-born representatives are hereby expelled from the Galactic Compact, effective immediately. Trade routes revoked, diplomatic immunity dissolved, military coordination ceased. You are no longer recognized by this body. The council chamber stank of old power. Light streamed through crystalline spires that pierced the void, throwing colorless fire across the faces of empires. No stone, no banners. Just cold air, clean walls, and the scent of dominance, long unchallenged. Ambassador Revik Calder of Earth stood alone on the speaking platform. No entourage, no translation nodes, no bowed head. He listened as Earth's sentence was spoken. The words were precise, sterile, delivered in perfect neutral tones by the adjudicator species, creatures bred to speak without emotion, so that no one could call the council cruel. But cruelty was baked into the silence that followed. No one objected. Not the cold-blooded strategists of the Threx Continuum, not the silicon-minded Velex, not even the pale-winged Iliari, who once called Earth young and promising. Not anymore. Calder didn't flinch. His uniform was plain. No ribbons, no crest. Just the black and steel seal of Earth's unified command pressed over his heart. He gave the chamber one slow look, not pleading, calculating. Then he turned and walked out. No one stopped him. That was their mistake. 6 days later, Calder stood before the eyes of a world. The broadcast was hardlined through every relay, colony, and outpost that still bore the Terran seal. He spoke from the command citadel, where orbital strikes could be called down with a gesture, and now, where something older than war had awakened. We are alone now. He let the words hang. They said we were too violent, too stubborn, too ungovernable, that we held too tight to our dead gods, too loose with our treaties, too quick with our weapons. They called us primitive. They forgot one thing. We build. He stepped aside as the feed split into dozens of fragments, images flashing in sequence, shipyards in Jupiter orbit, glowing red with heat, frozen bunkers under Europa igniting to life, Martian factories resuming long-dormant protocols. Let them watch, Calder said, his voice low now. Let them calculate, hesitate, rationalize. Let them turn their backs and think we'll die in the dark. But they exiled the wrong species. We are Earthborn, and we never build just fleets. A pause. We build empires. 50 Earth Standard years had passed. The Council believed humanity was broken. That exile had crushed their spirit, that they had scattered, gone silent, gone extinct. For all they knew, Earth no longer existed. The Galactic Council continued, as it always had. We order. You obey, until the day that balance shattered. With the arrival of something worse than rebellion. They called themselves the Shadowborn. They had ships, but nothing we could see. No emissions, no trails, no biosignatures, as if the void itself carried them. They drifted into council space, as if they'd always been there, cloaked in silence and a pressure that made even the strongest minds sweat beneath their skin. No one knew when they arrived, only that they had. And once they did, entire systems began to vanish. Not conquered, not invaded, erased. The first to fall was Velex Prime, seat of the crystalline logic empire, archivists of stellar history. One moment, they were transmitting reports to the Council. The next, dash. Their entire star system flickered off every known sensor. No debris, no light, no echoes. Just absence, as if reality itself had been hollowed out. Council probes arrived hours later. They found nothing. Just silence. Panic set in. The balance of power, once unshakable, began to crack. Meetings turned into arguments, orders into pleading. The great species of the compact, once so sure of their own supremacy, now looked over their shoulders with unease. And then, he came. Rowland Drax. He arrived alone, in a ship that looked more like a wound than a vessel. Hull scarred, engines coughing plasma. The emblem of the old Corsair clans was half burned from the prow. What remained of his crew stayed behind in orbit, half starved, half mad. Their eyes hollow from what they'd seen. In the grand hall of the Galactic Council, where silence was weaponized and posture was power, Rowland Drax stood like blood on marble. Leathers scorched, voice like gravel, a blade at his hip. Not for show. He didn't bow, didn't waste time. He went straight to the point. "Your council wants answers," he growled, every word like thunder soaked in rust. "I've got one. Maybe the only one that matters." Murmurs rippled across the chamber. Dozens of species leaned in. Translators flickered. Drax stepped forward and dragged a black box behind him. Cracked, scorched, humming with damaged data cores. He kicked it forward. The glyphs etched into the casing screamed. Emergency beacons, corrupted logs, planetary distress calls. That was Virex 7. My hideout. Gone. Not bombed. Not burned. Just erased. His eye twitched. Not fear. Memory. The thing that did it didn't fire a weapon. It floated, and the void answered. For a moment, space itself bent around it, like gravity forgot what it was doing. Light twisted the wrong way, every sensor froze, and then, nothing, as if the universe blinked. Silence fell. Even the Valex remnants said nothing. "You're not ready," Drax said, stepping closer. "But someone might be. The ghosts you exiled, the ones who build in silence. I know where they are." He leaned forward, voice low, deliberate. "The humans are alive, and I can get you to them." The chamber erupted into noise, protests, panic, suspicion. Some accused Drax of trickery, others demanded proof. The adjudicator attempted to restore order, its voice flat and emotionless, but sharp. The species known as human were formally exiled. They are not recognized as allies. Any attempt to engage them directly is in violation of Article --. A new voice cut through the chaos like a blade, not loud, but impossible to ignore. The Eliathari delegate. Elarian Vel rose from her place, graceful, cloaked in living silk, her eyes unreadable beneath the organic shimmer of her skin. Enough. The room fell quiet again. "You watch the Valex die without lifting a finger," she said, voice soft as ice. "You call this a law?" "It is cowardice wrapped in protocol." The adjudicator turned toward her. "The record stands. Earth is..." "Still there," Vel interrupted. "And if what this pirate says is true, they may be the only species stubborn enough to survive what's coming." A pause. "You may fear waking old ghosts, but I remember what those ghosts built. I remember what they endured, and I remember what they swore." Her gaze swept the room. We should not send warships. We should send a signal. The adjudicator hesitated. There is no open channel. Drax cracked a smile. There is, if you know where to knock. The chamber burned with noise. The moment Rallin Drax spoke the word humans, the council fractured. Some species hissed in derision. Others shouted in alarm. The orderly theater of diplomacy collapsed into the raw sound of fear. The adjudicator's voice tried to cut through, flat and neutral as ever. Order. This session will remain in... But no one listened. The Threx Continuum demanded the pirate's execution on the spot. The Velix remnants, cold and crystalline, whispered that perhaps extinction had been too merciful. The Ilithari delegate Vel stood motionless, her gaze fixed on Drax. The pirate ignored them all. He bent, dragged a scorched console from his satchel, and dropped it onto the floor with a sound like a hammer striking stone. Wires spilled out, cracked emitters coughing light. The chamber guards raised their weapons until Vel's voice slid across the air. Stand down, Delegate Ilarian Vel commanded. She did not shout. Her melodious voice was enough to make anyone obey. They all calmed down and watched the pirate. Drax crouched, tapping commands with scarred fingers. The device wheezed to life, projecting a lattice of broken glyphs into the air. You want them? His voice was a growl. You don't send words. They don't listen to words anymore. You send this. He struck the console. A pulse rippled out. Not light, not sound. Something deeper. A rhythm like a heartbeat. Who beats? Pause. 2 beats. Pause. Raw defiance encoded into spectrum so low the chamber's stone began to hum. The delegates shifted uncomfortably. Even those with no ears felt it in their bones. This is how you knock on a Terran door, Drax said. You don't beg. You don't command. You let them know someone out there remembers the rhythm. Vel inclined her head once, her silken cloak whispering. Send it. The adjudicator protested. This act is unsanctioned. The compact does not acknowledge, but the rhythm went out anyway. Deep in exile space, a brown dwarf burned faintly in the dark, more ember than flame. Around it orbited a listening post, black against black, masked in distortion fields so perfect, even passing meteors bent around it. Inside, 3 Terran watch officers worked their endless shift. The air was stale, the walls scarred, the consoles patched with plates of mismatched alloy. One of them, Lieutenant Zach Gordon, froze. His board lit with an incoming pulse. He adjusted the filters, checked, rechecked. The rhythm hit him like a fist to the chest. 2 beats. Pause. 2 beats. Pause. His throat went dry. Control, he whispered. We've got a knock. The words spread through the station like fire. Boots hammered steel. Sleep was abandoned. Systems that had been silent for 50 years came alive with sudden, ruthless precision. The signal was Terran, no mistaking it. Someone out there remembered. At the heart of unified command, Marshal Cade Rennick watched the black hull stretch across vacuum. It wasn't finished. Not yet. He was here to inspect the final phase of its construction. The warship was enormous, a spear of alloy and teeth, its surface layered in armor plates that swallowed light. Along its spine, weapons bays yawned open, venting heat like predators breathing. Crew swarmed across its surface in exo-rigs, welding, hammering, testing. Rennick stood on the observation deck, hands clasped behind his back. His uniform bore no decoration, only the iron seal of unified command. His hair was white at the temples, his face carved by years that exile had turned into stone. Stress test complete, the shipmaster reported beside him. Hull integrity holds at 103% projected tolerance. Reactor cores stable. All systems green. Rennick didn't answer at once. His gaze lingered on the vessel, this child of silence and secrecy. Then a runner approached, chest heaving, eyes wide. He saluted. "Marshal, priority relay from listening post 9. They say the Council sent a knock." The words hung heavy. Rennick turned at last, his eyes cold steel. "So," he said softly, "the galaxy remembers we exist." The shipmaster shifted uneasily. "Orders, sir." Rennick let the silence stretch, watching the dark warship drift like a blade unsheathed. "Let them wait," he said. "Desperation makes good leverage." He turned, cloak snapping behind him as he strode toward the command lifts. His voice carried without needing volume. He paused, just long enough for silence to settle. "Bring Calder." The chamber was stone and steel, buried in the bones of a forgotten moon, one no satellite had ever mapped. A war council of exile, hidden from the galaxy for 50 years. Marshal Cade Rennick stood at the head of the table. His eyes were iron, his back straight, despite years of exile bending most men into shadows. The knock had come. The council had begged in rhythm. Now, the question was not if humanity would answer, but how. Calder entered without ceremony. No guards, no heraldry. Just a man in plain black uniform, the Terran seal over his heart. He was older now, hair silvering, face harder, the years of silence written into the lines around his eyes. The two men regarded each other across the table. They had not spoken in decades, but nothing needed to be said. They were oil and fire, kept apart because together they could ignite the galaxy. Rennick broke the silence first. "The Council knocks. I say we let them rot." Calder's voice was calm, steady, surgical. "And I say, desperation is the strongest currency in existence. They will pay more now than they ever would have before." The table was crowded with commanders, ministers, and strategists. None dared interrupt. This was a duel, words drawn like blades. Rennick leaned forward, jaw like granite. "They cast us into the dark. They exiled us like criminals. And now that the dark comes for them, they beg us to hold the line. Why should I waste Terran blood to save theirs?" Calder's eyes narrowed. "Because their terror is leverage. Because if we refuse, we remain shadows forever, forgotten, feared, irrelevant. If we accept, on our terms, we carve our name into the stars." The chamber stilled. Rennick's gaze was a predator's, searching for weakness. He found none. Finally, Calder reached into his case. He placed a single data crystal on the table. It glowed faintly, pulsing with restrained energy. 30 years ago, he said, voice lower now. "We saw them." No one moved. Calder pressed the crystal. The air shimmered. A projection filled the chamber. A planet wreathed in blue oceans and white clouds. Alive. Vibrant. And then, the void bent. Not fire. Not bombs. Not invasion. A hole in reality itself bloomed above the world, blacker than black, devouring light, devouring matter, devouring sound. The planet shuddered once, as if in agony. And then it was gone. Not broken, not burned. Erased. The image ended. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. Calder's hand rested on the dead crystal. We did not intervene. We watched. We learned. We buried the memory so deep, Even our own people did not know. He looked across the table at Rennick. And for 3 decades, you've been preparing something, haven't you? The Marshal's expression didn't change, but there was a weight in his eyes, confirmation without words. Slowly, he reached to his command node and tapped a sequence. A new image filled the air. Not darkness this time. Light. Blinding, roaring, tearing through void like a blade. Energy drawn from a white hole, impossibility harnessed, light sharpened into weapon. This, Rennick said, voice like thunder restrained, is what we built. The Shadowborn consume with black holes. We will answer with the fire of their opposite, our white suns against their void. The chamber breathed again. Commanders whispered. Ministers stared. Calder's voice cut through the noise, cold steel. And what price do we demand for revealing this? Rennick's eyes found his, unblinking. That, he said, is why I need you. You'll speak to the council. You'll name the cost. Calder leaned forward, his voice like iron dragged across stone. Then let it be this. Recognition. Not as supplicants, not as exiles. Humanity fights only if humanity rises as its equal, not a seat in their chamber. He let the silence sharpen. A council of our own. Sovereign. Absolute. Authority matched to theirs, not beneath it. The words hung heavy. For the first time in years, Rennick's lips curved into something like a smile. Not warmth, not agreement. Something colder. Approval of ruthlessness. At last, he said. You sound like a Terran. The chamber vibrated with a distant alarm. A signal from deep space scouts. Shadowborn activity. Closer than ever before. Rennick turned toward the sound. His eyes gleamed like a man who had been waiting his whole life for war. Looks like our fire will be tested sooner than I thought. Calder closed the crystal case. Then let's make the galaxy watch. Where they devour with collapse, he murmured, we strike with creation. The chamber of the Galactic Compact had not seen a human face in 50 years. When Ambassador Revik Calder's image flared into being, the hall convulsed with noise. Some delegates hissed in disbelief. Others shouted over translators, voices breaking protocol for the first time in generations. The adjudicator barked for silence, its tone still flat, but the edge of strain betrayed it. Calder did not bow. He did not wait for order. You exiled us into the dark, he said, voice steady, cutting through chaos like a blade. You called us primitive, violent, unfit. You thought we would wither without your mercy. The chamber seethed, but his tone never faltered. You were wrong. While you argued in circles, we built in silence. While you hid behind protocol, we stared into the void that is now devouring you. And we learned. The Ilithari delegate Vel leaned forward, eyes unreadable. The Valex remnants twitched crystalline limbs. The Threx continuum hissed for his transmission to be severed. Calder ignored them. You ask for our help? You will have it. We will fight the Shadowborn. We will burn our fleets against theirs until their darkness breaks. A pause. But the price is this. Recognition. Humanity does not crawl back to your chamber as exiles begging forgiveness. We do not want a seat in your council. His gaze swept the room, cold and unyielding. We will build a council of our own. Sovereign, equal, our authority will match yours in every way, or you can face the shadows alone. The silence that followed was heavier than any roar. Calder's image flickered, and then he was gone. Command Citadel. Hours later. Rennick stood before the war map when the alarms began to wail. A red sigil pulsed across the display. Helios Reach, one of the outer colonies. Population, 3 million. The officer's voice cracked as he delivered the report. Marshal, Shadowborn signatures inside Helios Reach orbit. Civilian stations collapsing. Defense grid failing. The chamber stilled. Rennick's jaw tightened. He turned toward his staff. Scramble the task force. Evacuate the civilians. Helios Reach does not fall. He tapped the map, selecting a single icon. Sleek, black, bristling with untested power. And bring the Aegis. Time to prove our fire. At Helios Reach, the colony's sky was already falling. Above the resource world, stations buckled under invisible pressure. Ore haulers spun into fire, their hulls twisting like soft clay. Shadowborn vessels drifted through orbit like predators through a herd. Geometry wrong, edges fraying into void. Their weapons were not beams or missiles, but lances of absence, lines of black that carved silence through steel. On the surface, colonists flooded evacuation ports. Sirens wailed, dust rising in choking clouds as shuttles clawed for the sky. Families pressed against barriers, eyes wide with the dread that came from more than fear. It was the weight of being prey. And then, the sky lit with Terran steel. A dozen destroyers roared from slipstream, black hulls gleaming. Frigates surged past them in wolf-pack formation, scattering decoys and scrambling the void's own echoes. And at their heart, massive and unyielding, the Aegis arrived. Its prow glowed with restrained light. On every Terran channel, the voice of Captain Joran Gray rang out, calm and ironbound. Helios Reach! We are here. Hold the line. The Shadowborn turned as one. The void bent, and the battle began. Terran frigates darted like knives, snapping volleys into enemy flanks, their guns hammering until barrels glowed. Destroyers locked shields over evacuation corridors, intercepting gravity lances with walls of plasma that burned red. Before collapsing, but the Shadowborn fought like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. One vessel blinked forward, literally folding space to appear inside a Terran formation. Its void lance scythed through 2 frigates, unraveling them mid-maneuver. Their crews never even screamed. Another ship twisted a defense station into a spiral, metal shrieking as it bent into impossibility before snapping into dust. The battle was chaos. Terran grit held the line, but the cost rose with every breath. On the Aegis bridge, Captain Joran Gray stood at the command dais, boots braced against the trembling deck. His jaw was set like stone as the Shadowborn closed in. Hold positions, Gray ordered. Make them bleed for every meter. The weapons officer's voice cracked under the strain. Captain, the projector is ready. But, sir, we've never... Gray's eyes didn't waver. Then today we learn. Charge the core. The Aegis shuddered as power built. Deep inside, reactors screamed, drawing impossible energy from a captured white hole. A light that should not exist, chained by human hands. Shadowborn ships converged, sensing the threat. Black arcs raked the Aegis hull. Armor plates peeled. Fires erupted. Still, the charge climbed. 90%, 95. Captain, another officer shouted. Shields failing! Gray's voice was iron. Fire! The void erupted. A lance of pure light tore free, brighter than suns, sharper than any blade. It did not burn. It unmade. The Shadowborn's darkness recoiled, edges collapsing, geometry tearing itself apart. The first enemy vessel screamed in a frequency no human throat could match. Its hull folded in on itself, black collapsing into nothing. Another tried to warp away, but the light tore its wake apart, scattering it into dust. The rest fled, folding into silence, abandoning the field as if the light itself poisoned them. When the brilliance faded, Helios Reach still stood. Stations broken, fleets scarred, but the colony alive. Evacuation ships cleared orbit, carrying millions who would see another sunrise. On the bridge of the Aegis, Captain Gray watched the wreckage drift. His voice was low, steady. Now we know. They can bleed. From the command citadel, Rennick's reply came across the tight beam, cold and certain. And the galaxy will learn it. Back at the citadel, Calder received the transmission. He stood alone, eyes on the report, and whispered the words he would soon deliver to the Council. This is what our exile has forged. The chamber of the Galactic Compact was no longer orderly. First came the transmission from the outer sectors. Helios Reach, an Earth colony long thought defenseless, had survived. The delegates watched grainy feeds of evacuation transports clearing orbit, Terran warships bleeding but unbroken, and a weapon of impossible light tearing shadowborn vessels into silence. The hall convulsed. Some shouted fraud. Others hissed that exile was a mistake, that humanity had grown dangerous in the dark. The adjudicator called for silence, its voice thin against the storm. Then the second report arrived. Dalar Prime, one of the Compact's oldest colonies, jewel of the central sectors, had flickered into absence. Not fire, not ruins, simply gone, as cleanly as Velex Prime before it. The chamber fell into panic. Delegates shouted over one another, voices tangling in languages never meant to share the same air. The adjudicator barked for order, but its tone cracked beneath the weight. 3 billion lives had vanished in an instant, and the shadow that had taken them was closer now, not at the edge of forgotten sectors, but at the Compact's very heart. Into that storm of panic, a voice cut sharp as a blade. Calder projected into the chamber once again. His figure stood tall, black uniform unadorned, face calm as stone. He did not wait for silence. He made his own. You watched Velex vanish. You watched Vierex vanish. Now Dalar burns in absence, and still you argue. The chamber roiled, but his words pressed down on them like gravity. You know what we have built. You saw Helios Reach survive what should have been its end. You saw our fire break their dark. That was your proof. Delegate Ilarian Vel rose, silk shimmering across her form. We cannot deny it, she said quietly. The Terrans have forged weapons beyond our imagining. They held where none of us could. The Threx delegate hissed, scales glinting. And for this, they demand power equal to our own? To birth a second council? This is madness. Calder's gaze cut to him like frost. Madness would be leaving the galaxy's fate in your hands. You had centuries to prepare. You wasted them in protocol and pretense. We were exiled. We were forgotten. And yet it is us, only us, who hold the weapon that makes the shadows bleed. The adjudicator's voice wavered, the first crack in its manufactured neutrality. Your demand is unprecedented. Authority equal to the Compact cannot be— Cannot, Calder interrupted. Or will not. Words will not stop the void. Choose, or your titles will vanish as your worlds do. The chamber fell into a low, venomous silence. None spoke the truth out loud, but every delegate felt it. Humanity had become indispensable. Hours later, Rennick leaned over the war map, its surface lit in crimson alarms. Another Shadowborn incursion. Not a border raid this time. Not Helios Reach. A mining colony farther inside Terran claim space, Krios Gate, already under siege. Reports flooded in. Civilians screaming through broken comms. Orbital defenses collapsing. Frigates shredded by void lances. But worse than the reports were the tactics. Rennick studied the feeds, jaw tightening. "They've learned," he muttered. The enemy ships no longer charged blindly into ambushes. They warped in staggered patterns, feinting, baiting frigate packs into traps. They masked their void lances in bursts of distortion, striking from unexpected vectors. The Shadowborn were adapting. "Orders, Marshal?" asked the aide at his side, pale with dread. Rennick's voice was steady. "Scramble Fleet Ironclad. Reinforce Krios Gate. Evacuation first, then suppression. We hold the colony." He paused, eyes narrowing on the shifting enemy icons. "And tell Captain Gray, the Shadows aren't fools anymore. Treat them like predators that bleed and bite." Within the hour, Fleet Ironclad burned through slipstream toward Krios Gate, destroyers bristling and frigates running in tight wolf packs around the Aegis. Orders spread like fire through the decks, evacuation corridors to secure, transports to shield, a colony to save. Every crewman knew the cost could be ruin, but not one flinched. Krios Gate. The colony's sky was ash and fire. Shadowborn warforms drifted through the void, their presence pressing against the minds of every man, woman, and child below. Stations cracked under invisible weight. Cargo haulers tore in half, their screams cut short in static. Terran frigates darted in packs, hurling coordinated salvos. For a moment they struck true. One Shadowborn hull shuddered, fragments breaking loose. But the enemy folded space, vanishing and reappearing behind them, void lances carving through their formation. 2 frigates gone in an instant. On the bridge of the Aegis, Captain Joran Gray's knuckles whitened on the railing. "Hold the line," he barked. "Push them back from the evacuation corridor. I don't care what it costs." The Aegis fired, its broadside tearing across the void. Shadowborn ships rippled under the impact, but kept coming, relentless. Their void lances struck, shields buckled. Alarms screamed across the bridge. "Captain!" the gunnery officer cried. "They're targeting the transports!" Gray's eyes were steel. "Not while I breathe." "Bring the projector online." The reactor core roared. The white hole weapon began to charge, power bleeding into every seam of the ship. Shadowborn vessels swarmed, twisting space around the Aegis, lances hammering its shields into collapse. But the charge climbed. 90%. 95. "Captain!" the officer's voice cracked. "Hull breaches on decks 5 and 9. Gray's jaw clenched. He looked to his crew, saw their fear, their grit, their refusal to yield. "Fire!" The void ripped open with light. The white hole torrent cut across the battlefield, shredding the Shadowborn formation. Their vessels twisted, geometry breaking apart, black hulls unraveling in shrieks that rattled bone. One dissolved entirely. Another fled, ripping a scar into the void as it vanished. The rest broke, scattering into silence. The field cleared. The colony still stood. Transports cleared orbit. Survivors lived. But wreckage drifted thick, Terran ships torn and burning. Victory, Yes, but costly, bloody, hard-won. On the Aegis bridge, Gray allowed his shoulders to relax. His voice was hoarse but steady. "Marshal, Krios Gate stands. The shadows adapt, but they break." Rennick's reply came cold and certain from Mars Command. "Then we stop waiting for their moves. The next battle won't be defense. We take the war to them." Rennick's words hung in the command chamber like a sentence. For 50 years, humanity had endured in silence, bracing against exile, holding the line when the shadows came. Now, the line was no longer enough. The war would not be fought on Terran soil alone. It would be carried into the dark itself. So, for Calder's next appearance before the Council, his voice was not that of a petitioner, but of a sovereign demanding obedience. The Council chamber had never felt so brittle. Panic lingered in every corner, cloaked in silks and crystalline postures, but Calder saw it for what it was: fear. The Shadowborn had bled again into the heart of compact space, and the proud empires were running out of lies to shield themselves. Calder's image shimmered before them, projected into their hall as if exile had never happened. His uniform was plain, his expression colder than stone. "Our next move is set," he said. His voice was steady, each word a hammer. "The Shadowborn's engines of erasure will fall. We strike them in their own territory. Humanity is already committed. The question is simple. Will you stand beside us, or wait for the dark to take you next?" The Threx spat, more bluster than conviction. The Valex muttered crystalline dissent, brittle and hollow. The adjudicator droned about precedent, its voice thinner than ever. Only Vel sat still, her gaze locked upon Calder, silks alive with subtle motion. At last, silence crept back, heavy and unwilling. Calder gave it no mercy. "You will follow us into the fire, or you will burn alone. Humanity is equal now. In fact, we are already leading." No voice rose to challenge him. Not truly. They had seen too much. And so, with reluctance and venom, the Council bent. Humanity was recognized, sovereign and equal. Calder inclined his head once, victory sharp in his eyes. "Then we begin." At the Citadel, Rennick gathered his commanders. The air in the war chamber vibrated with tension. A jagged projection spun above the table, casting the room in fractured light. It was not a planet, nor a star, but something in between. An immense structure orbiting a dead sun, its surface writhing with distortions that bent sight. Rennick's voice was iron. "A Shadowborn construct. A reality engine. This is how they erase worlds. Operation Forgefire will strike here. We cripple it or destroy it outright." The Council muttered, some pale, some eager. Calder's gaze cut through the room. This is not defense. This is war in their house. Rennick's jaw tightened, the faintest spark of something savage in his eyes. Yes, at last. The fleet assembled. Terran destroyers, black and unyielding, slid into formation beside alien warships that had once sneered at human steel. Threx barks hissed in their holds. Valex cruisers hummed crystalline resonance. Illithari wings glittered in silence. They bristled at Terran command, but Calder bound them with threats sharper than blades. Follow or burn. At the center of the armada loomed the Aegis, scarred from Krios Gate but alive, her hull a black spear against the void. Gray stood on her bridge, calm as stone, his eyes steady on the horizon none could yet see. And last came Ryland Drax. His corsair limped from dock like a wounded predator, patched with scars, engines coughing. He leaned on the comms rail, voice rough with smoke. "Last dance, Captain," he said to Gray. "I know roads they don't." Gray studied him a long moment, then gave a curt nod. "Then lead us through." The void beyond was wrong. Stars twisted into spirals that should not exist. Constellations warped into unfamiliar shapes. Space itself seemed alive, pressing against hulls, whispering on frequencies meant for nightmares. At its center, the engine pulsed. Vast, colossal, orbiting the corpse of a broken sun, its gravity bleeding into space like a wound. The Shadowborn came instantly. They slid from folds of blackness, jagged forms that bent eyes and sensors alike. Their void lances lashed, unraveling steel and matter in lines of absolute silence. Alien squadrons faltered, command dissolving into panic. But Terrans pressed forward. Frigates struck in wolf-pack bursts, coordinated and merciless. Destroyers spread their shields wide, interposing themselves between alien hulls and annihilation. The Aegis fired broadside after broadside, her crew bleeding into their consoles, but steady. "Hold the line," Gray snapped. "Drive them back." Every meter. The engine's shield blazed ahead, an impossible distortion wall. No weapon touched it. No missile struck true. Drax's voice crackled across comms, bitter and steady. "I can get you through." Gray barked back. "You won't come back!" The pirate laughed, harsh and broken. "Story of my life. But maybe this time it means something." His Corsair burned forward, engine screaming. It tore through Shadowborn swarms, hull bleeding, atmosphere venting. He rammed the distortion head-on. The explosion ripped across the void, shattering the wall, tearing open a gap just wide enough for a single ship. Gray's teeth clenched. "Aegis through. Fire on my mark." The white hole core screamed awake. Energy that should not exist coursed through the ship, bleeding light through every seam. The Aegis dove into the gap, Shadowborn closing like wolves on prey. Gray stood tall, hand steady. "Fire!" The void erupted with light. The torrent lanced across the construct, brighter than suns, sharper than blades. The engine convulsed, shrieking in impossible frequencies. Fractures raced across its form. Then it collapsed inward, imploding into a storm of broken gravity and torn silence. The Shadowborn scattered. Some dissolved, their geometry shredding. Others warped away, abandoning the field. The survivors were left alone, burning, scarred, but victorious. Amid wreckage and drifting fire, Terran rescue crews found a faint signal. The shattered Corsair, atmosphere gone, systems dead, and inside, clinging to life, Raylan Drax. They pulled him from the wreckage, bones broken, flesh burned, breath shallow. He slipped into coma before medics could stabilize him, but he lived, a stubborn ghost refusing death. Scouts combed what remained of the engine. The truth they carried back chilled even Rennick's iron face. No crew, no species, nothing alive. The Shadowborn were not a people. They were tools, weapons, harbingers. Calder heard the report, his face carved from iron. "Then we have not fought an enemy. We have fought its instruments." Rennick's eyes narrowed, voice steady as stone. "Then let the galaxy see. If we can break the tools, we can break the hand that wields them." The hall of the Galactic Compact was not the same as when Calder last stood within it. The crystalline spires still shone, the polished floors still gleamed, but the air was no longer arrogant. It was brittle, tired, afraid. They had all seen it now. Helios Reach, Krios Gate. Forge fire. Humanity had gone where the compact would not, bled where they could not, and returned with truths darker than nightmares. And so, for the first time in 50 years, humanity did not stand as exile. It stood as judge. Calder's image burned across the chamber, steady as iron. Beside him, Rennick's figure loomed in silence, and though Captain Gray remained aboard the Aegis, his name carried through every whisper, commander who had driven fire into the void. Behind them all lay the shadow of Drax, broken but alive in Terran stasis, a symbol of humanity's refusal to let death dictate terms. The adjudicator's voice began, as neutral as ever, but weaker now, as if its circuits strained. By precedent, the matter of Terran sovereignty must be tabled until... Calder cut across like a blade. There will be no delay. You saw us break the Shadowborn. You saw us tear apart their engine. And you saw the truth of them. They are not a species. They are tools. And you cowered behind law while our fleets bled. The Threx hissed. You demand too much. You would overturn centuries of stagnation, Calder snapped. His gaze swept the chamber, his voice rising like storm. You exiled us because we were too violent, too stubborn, too ungovernable. And in exile, we became exactly what you feared. We built in silence. We learned to stare into the dark and not look away. And when the shadows came, it was us, only us, who stood. Vel rose, silks whispering like water, her gaze steady. The truth is plain. Without the Terrans, we would already be ash. They do not ask for a seat. They demand what they have already taken. The Velex delegate shuddered, crystalline voice sharp. And if we refuse? Calder leaned forward, his eyes like knives. Then you will face the next shadow alone. Silence fell, crushing, absolute. For long moments, the chamber held its breath. Then the adjudicator spoke again, voice flat, but stripped of its veneer of control. By majority acknowledgement, the Terran High Council is recognized. Sovereign, equal, independent in all matters. The words rang like a sentence, or a coronation. Calder inclined his head once, nothing more. He did not smile. Victory was not joy. It was inevitability. You cast us into the dark, he said softly, and the chamber strained to hear. And in the dark, we built fire. Remember this day, for exile did not break us. It forged us. His image flickered and was gone. At Command Citadel, Rennick stood beside Calder as the transmission ended. For the first time, there was no argument between them, no sharp edge of diplomacy against steel, only the weight of what they had done. In the med bays below, Drax lay silent in stasis, body broken but alive. The pirate who had gambled his life and been dragged back from the abyss by Terran hands. Above, the Aegis drifted in battered orbit, her hull scarred but proud, proof that even in exile, humanity had learned to turn silence into strength. Rennick's voice was low, steady, meant for Calder, but echoing across the chamber. They feared what exile would make of us. They were right. Calder's reply was just as quiet. And now the galaxy will never forget. They turned not toward applause, not toward celebration, but toward the next horizon, because they both knew the shadows would return. But so would humanity.